It was a quiet evening in the woods. The sun was just beginning to set, casting a soft golden glow across the tall trees. Birds chirped in the distance, and the rustling of leaves in the light breeze added to the peaceful atmosphere. But this peace would soon be shattered. John, a retired military officer, sat on the front porch of his small cabin, enjoying the calm after a long day of work. His dog, Max, a large German shepherd, lay beside him, content to enjoy the evening with his owner. John was used to the silence of the forest. He had moved out here years ago to escape the chaos of his past life. But Max, always alert, never seemed to relax fully. John took a sip from his coffee cup, watching the last rays of sunlight fade into twilight. Suddenly Max perked up, his ears standing tall as his nose twitched. He was no longer lying lazily on the porch. The dog was standing at attention, eyes locked on something in the distance. "Max, what's up, boy?" John asked, sensing that something was off. Max let out a low growl, his eyes never leaving the woods. John's instincts kicked in. He stood up, setting his coffee down. Something wasn't right. Max barked loudly, his tail stiff and rigid. Without thinking, John grabbed his jacket and started walking toward the woods. Max was already ahead of him, moving faster than usual, as if he knew exactly where to go. As they entered the woods, the air grew cooler. The peaceful sounds of nature had faded, replaced by the eerie silence that now surrounded them. Max was leading the way, his nose to the ground. John followed closely, his heart starting to beat a little faster, wondering what was going on. They walked deeper into the trees until they reached a small clearing. It was there that John saw a figure lying on the ground, half hidden by the underbrush. At first glance, John thought it was just another animal, maybe a deer that had been injured. But then he saw the uniform, the dark fabric, the military insignia, and the blood that stained the ground beneath the figure. Max growled again, this time louder and more insistent. The dog stood several feet away, his posture tense, his eyes fixed on the fallen figure. "Who's there?" John called out, his voice steady but unsure. He didn't know whether he should approach or back away. The last thing he wanted was to be caught in something dangerous, but his curiosity got the better of him. Stepped closer, Max following but keeping his distance, still growling softly. The figure on the ground was still breathing, but just barely. John could see the rise and fall of the man's chest, each breath coming in shallow gasps. The soldier or whatever he was seemed unconscious, his face pale and covered in dirt. His uniform looked torn, and there were several deep gashes across his body. John's first instinct was to help. He had been trained to deal with injuries, and his military background told him to act fast. But then, something strange happened. Max barked loudly, a sharp, commanding sound that echoed through the trees. John froze. The dog had never acted this way before. It was as if Max was trying to warn him, telling him that something was wrong. John bent down beside the injured man, cautiously reaching out to check for a pulse. The soldier's wrist was cold to the touch, but there was a faint pulse. He was alive, but barely. John knew he had to act fast if he wanted to save him. Something didn't sit right with him. He couldn't explain it, but there was a feeling deep in his gut that told him this was no ordinary situation. The soldier's presence in these woods, the strange device strapped to his arm, and Max's intense reaction all felt unnatural. Max growled again, this time more forcefully, his eyes locked onto the soldier's wrist. John looked down at the device. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. It looked like a small metallic watch, but the design was too advanced. The edges were smooth and sharp, almost as if it had been crafted by a technology far beyond what John was familiar with. "What the hell is this?" John muttered to himself, his fingers brushing against the strange device. As soon as his skin made contact with it, the device emitted a soft hum, almost as if it had come to life. Max barked once more, louder and more urgently this time. The dog was visibly agitated, pacing back and forth. John could sense that the dog was scared, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a nervous energy. John stood up, his mind racing. Dear, there was something important about this soldier, something he didn't understand. His military training told him to leave no man behind, to help anyone in need. But his gut told him that this was different. This was a situation far more complicated than he had ever encountered before. Max, come on, John said, his voice steady but with an edge of concern. The dog, still uneasy, reluctantly followed him as they moved away from the soldier. Glance back one last time, his eyes locking on the soldier's unconscious form. He knew he couldn't just leave him there, but he wasn't sure what to do next. What was this soldier doing in the woods? Why was he wearing such advanced technology? And why was Max so on edge? As they made their way back to the cabin, the quiet of the woods returned, but the sense of unease lingered. The feeling that he had just stumbled upon something far bigger than himself, and that whatever came next, he was in over his head. Max, walking silently beside him, seemed to agree. The dog knew there was more to this story, more danger, more mystery, and John couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. Whatever it was, he was sure it would change everything. The cabin was eerily quiet as John sat by the window, staring out into the night. His mind raced with thoughts of the strange soldier he had found in the woods. What had he stumbled upon? Why had Max reacted so strongly? Were too many questions, and not enough answers. Max lay by the door, his usual calm demeanor still absent. The dog's ears twitched every now and then, as if he were listening for something. It wasn't like him to be so on edge. John's hand instinctively went to the rifle on the wall, the one he hadn't touched in years. He wasn't sure why he felt the need to be prepared, but something deep inside told him that danger wasn't far behind. The night passed slowly. John couldn't sleep. The images of the soldier, the strange device, and Max's behavior kept running through his mind. At first light, he knew he had to go back to the woods. Something about this situation felt urgent. The soldier had to have answers, and John was determined to find them. When he reached the clearing where he had found the soldier, the first thing he noticed was the stillness.
Ow.
The woods were quiet, unnaturally so. No rustling leaves, no birds singing, just the sound of his boots crunching the dry ground beneath. Him, Max, ever alert, walked just ahead, sniffing the air, his eyes darting nervously as if he were searching for something. The soldier was still there, exactly where John had left him the night before. His body, however, seemed different now. The blood had stopped flowing, but his skin had taken on an odd, almost unnatural hue. The strange device on his wrist still hummed softly like an engine idling, but this time it seemed more powerful. It had a steady pulse, as if it was alive. John approached cautiously. He had been in enough dangerous situations to know not to take risks. But as he bent down to check on the soldier, he saw something that stopped him in his tracks. The soldier's eyes flickered open, but they were no longer human. There was something foreign in them, something not entirely human. The soldier's lips parted, but the words that came out were faint, almost garbled. The mission. Not ... over ... Its voice was raspy, but there was an urgency to it that made John's heart race. Take it easy, John whispered, trying to calm the soldier. But it was no use. The man's eyes darted around, his breath coming in. Short, shallow gasps. The soldier's hand twitched as he weakly tried to lift it, his fingers brushing against the device on his wrist. Max growled low, his body stiffening. John quickly looked down at the dog, who was now pacing in tight circles around the soldier. Max's behavior was becoming more erratic. His instincts told him something was wrong, and John wasn't sure whether it was the soldier or the device causing it. "Who are you?" John asked, his voice more demanding now. He needed answers. The soldier's eyes locked onto John's, and for the first time, there was a hint of recognition. "You ... don't understand," he rasped. "This ... it's all part of something bigger. The artifact ... it's calling." John's mind spun. Artifact? What artifact? The only thing John saw was the strange device on the soldier's wrist. Glowing with an eerie light, he reached out and touched it, feeling the strange hum beneath his fingers. It was warm to the touch, unlike anything he had ever felt before. The soldier's voice grew faint, as if he were struggling to stay conscious. "It's not just technology, it's a key. It's a key to something, beyond this world. His breath hitched, and his eyes fluttered shut again. I can't stop it, John's heart raced as the soldier's words echoed in his mind, a key to something beyond this world. Was this soldier part of a mission from another country? Or was there something more to this, something beyond even his understanding? Before he could ask any more questions, the soldier's body jerked violently. A strange energy seemed to surge through him, and for a brief moment, John saw his entire body glow. The faint blue light flickering around him like static electricity. Then, as quickly as it had come, the energy vanished, and the soldier's body went limp. Max was now barking wildly, jumping in the air and running around in tight circles, his eyes wide with fear. John could feel a chill run down his spine. Whatever was happening, it was far beyond anything he had ever seen. This wasn't just some enemy soldier lost in the woods. This was something else entirely. As John stood there, trying to process the situation, the soldier's wrist device started to pulse more intensely. It wasn't just humming anymore, it was vibrating, almost as if it were trying to communicate. The light it emitted became brighter, and John felt a strange pull toward it, like an invisible force tugging at him. Max's barks grew louder, more urgent. The dog was frantic now, pacing back and forth, his eyes darting around, searching for something John couldn't see. Max, calm down, John muttered, but his voice trembled. He wasn't sure if he was trying to reassure the dog or himself, and whatever was going on, he knew it was about to get worse. As John knelt beside the soldier, trying to figure out his next move, the ground beneath him suddenly vibrated. The air seemed to shift, growing heavier, as if the atmosphere itself was changing. The pulsing light from the device on the soldier's wrist was growing brighter, the energy in the air becoming thicker. John had been in enough dangerous situations to recognize when something was wrong. And right now, everything screamed that this was far beyond his control. Whatever this soldier had been a part of, whatever this device was, it was part of something far larger. Something that John couldn't even begin to understand. As the strange energy continued to grow, John realized that his life, and possibly the future of humanity, was about to change in ways he could never have imagined. John had seen his fair share of chaos and confusion in his time as a soldier, but nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to uncover. The soldier lay unconscious on the cold forest floor, the glowing device on his wrist still pulsing in rhythm with a strange, otherworldly hum. Max, ever watchful, refused to settle down, his growls growing more intense with every passing second. John couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled upon something far bigger than a simple combat mission. The soldier's cryptic words echoed. In his mind, the artifact, it's a key to something beyond this world. It didn't make sense. Why would a military soldier, clearly from a modern-day conflict, be carrying such an advanced piece of technology? Something that felt alien. He crouched next to the soldier, trying to keep his distance from the strange device. His instincts told him to be cautious. Whatever this was, it wasn't something he could handle on his own. Max suddenly let out a loud bark, snapping John out of his thoughts. The dog was fixated on the device, its glowing pulse now growing brighter. John followed Max's gaze and hesitated for a moment. There was something about this device, something more than just a simple piece of military tech. As if on cue, the soldier's eyes fluttered open once more. They were still wide with fear, but now there was something different about them. The panic that had once clouded his eyes had shifted to a deep, resigned understanding. He wasn't just another soldier. He had been part of something much more. Dangerous, I told you, the soldier rasped, his voice weak but clear. You don't understand. This mission. It was never just about fighting. The war, it's not here. It's across the stars. John's brow furrowed in confusion. What are you talking about? Who sent you? What mission? The soldier took in a deep, strained breath. The device on his wrist hummed louder, and the air around them seemed to charge with energy. Max's eyes widened in alarm, but he didn't bark. He was watching, waiting for something, just as John was. The soldier struggled to sit up, his breathing shallow. I'm not who you think I am. I'm part of a program, a sleeper cell designed to find and secure the artifact. He coughed violently, wincing in pain as the light from the device flickered. It's a key to an interdimensional gate, a weapon of mass destruction. John's mind reeled. The soldier was part of a program that involved interdimensional travel, and this artifact, whatever it was, had the power to unlock a gate. His heart raced as the implications sank in. This wasn't just some rogue soldier. This was something much darker, something that tied into a secret the government or anyone else would never talk about. You need to get away from this place. The soldier warned, his eyes now full of urgency. They'll be coming for me. For all of us, it's too late. They already know you're involved. His voice grew weaker as he slumped back down. John's mind was spinning. What could the soldier mean by they? Who were these people, and what did they want with him and this alien artifact? And why was the soldier so certain that they would be coming after him? Before he could ask another question, the soldier's hand reached up toward the device again, his fingers trembling. John's heart sank as he realized what the soldier was doing. No, don't. John shouted, but it was too late. The soldier's fingers made contact with the device, and in an instant, a blinding flash of light erupted. From it, John stumbled backward, covering his eyes as the light surged through the air. The world around him seemed to warp for a split second, and the ground beneath his feet trembled. Max howled, his fur standing on end as if the dog could feel the very air around them shifting. The intensity of the flash began to subside, but the hum from the device did not. In fact, it seemed to be getting louder. John's eyes slowly adjusted as the light faded, but the atmosphere around him had changed. The air was thick now, almost electric, and the forest seemed to grow unnaturally still. Max stopped barking, now standing perfectly still, his gaze locked on something beyond John's vision. For the first time, John realized that this wasn't just a fight for survival. This was something bigger. Whatever this soldier had been a part of, whatever this artifact was, it had the power to change everything. And John was right in the middle of it. Listen, the soldier's voice broke. Through John's thoughts, he had managed to push himself upright again, his face pale but determined. I'm not your enemy. I never was. We're all on the same side, and that key. He paused, swallowing hard. It's connected to something more dangerous than you can imagine. Something beyond this world. We need to find it before they do. John felt his heart race, the weight of the soldier's words sinking in. He had been involved in countless battles, but nothing like this. His entire life had prepared him for the typical dangers of war, but now he was faced with something that didn't belong to this world. Something that could tear the very fabric of reality apart. Max let out a low growl, his hackles raised, and John turned to see what the dog was reacting to. In the distance, through the trees, a faint, unnatural light flickered. They're here, the soldier whispered, his voice full of dread. And if they get to the artifact first, it'll be too late for all of us. John knew then that the path ahead would not only test his strength, but his understanding of the world itself. Whatever he thought he knew about war, about enemies, and allies would have to be redefined. This was the beginning of a fight that was far from anything he had ever faced before. The wind had picked up, swirling through the trees in gusts that seemed almost unnatural. John stood at the edge of the clearing, Max at his side, eyes fixed on the strange lights flickering in the distance. The soldier, his name was still unknown, was now leaning against a tree, his breathing shallow, but his resolve stronger than ever. Do you think you can survive this alone? The soldier asked, his voice hoarse but insistent. His face, now pale from exhaustion, held an unusual intensity, as if he had just come to a sudden realization. The eerie hum of the artifact continued. Vibrating through the air like a distant storm on the horizon, John hesitated. He had always been a man who worked alone, preferring solitude to the complications of partnership. But something about this situation felt different, dangerous, in a way that transcended anything he had ever encountered in his military career. I didn't ask for this, John finally said, his voice steady, but with a hint of frustration. You're the one who brought me into this mess. Now you're telling me I need to join forces with you? The soldier nodded, his eyes dark and haunted, as if he had seen the collapse of worlds. You don't have a choice. Whatever it is they want with the artifact, it's beyond anything you've ever faced. This isn't just a military mission. It's a race to control the fabric of reality itself. If we don't stop them, nothing will be left. John couldn't help but feel the weight of the soldier's words. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was something far more profound, something that made John's military experience feel trivial by comparison. There was no going back now. Whatever this soldier was involved in, whatever forces they were up against, it wasn't something John could face alone. He glanced at Max, who was unusually calm, standing by his side as if he knew exactly what was at stake. John's instincts told him that Max understood the gravity of the situation far more than he did. In that moment, John realized that his dog had become something more than just a pet. He had become part of this mission. Something about the bond between Max and the artifact was undeniable. The dog's reactions, his heightened senses, and even his uncanny understanding of what was happening around them made it clear. Max was no ordinary dog. "We'll do this together," John finally said, turning back to the soldier. "But you're going to tell me everything you know." "Yeah." "And we're doing this my way?" The soldier gave a small, weary smile. "Fair enough. You'll need to know everything if we're going to make it out of this alive." He glanced down at the device on his wrist, still pulsing with strange energy. "But be warned. Once you're involved, there's no turning back." John wasn't sure what that meant, but he didn't have time to dwell on it. The lights in the distance were growing brighter, the hum from the artifact growing louder, wherever or whatever was coming. For them wasn't far behind. "Max," John called softly, "stay close." Max gave a low whine as if he understood the urgency of the moment. The dog's eyes locked onto John's for a brief moment, a silent agreement passing between them. They were in this together. The soldier, too, was preparing for what came next. He adjusted the strange device on his wrist, muttering something under his breath, as if trying to make sense of it. The flickering lights in the distance grew brighter, and soon, John could hear the sound of engines in the distance, heavy, mechanical, and unmistakably threatening. "They've found us," the soldier whispered. "The forces I've been running from, they don't just want the artifact. They want everything it can unlock. They won't stop until they get it." John clenched his fists, his military training kicking in. He had been in situations like this before, dangerous, high stakes, with little time to prepare. But this felt different. This wasn't just about the enemy in front of him. This was about something far beyond anything he had ever encountered. "What's the plan?" John asked, his voice low and focused. "We run," the soldier said simply, standing tall despite his weakened state. "We find the artifact before they do. We get to it, and we use it against them. That's the only way we'll survive this." Before John could respond, Max barked sharply, his ears flat against his head. The dog was already in motion, running toward the source of the approaching lights. He knew something they didn't. He knew that time was running out. John and the soldier followed, not waiting for another second. As they ran through the woods, Max leading the way, John felt the ground shift beneath them. The very air seemed to hum with energy, charged with the power of the artifact. The soldier, though weak, moved quickly, his mind clearly focused on one thing: reaching the artifact before the enemy did. "We need to get there before they do," the soldier urged, his breath quickening. "If they get their hands on it, we're all doomed." Ahead of them suddenly stopped, turned back, his eyes wide with fear, and barked once more, a deep, warning bark. Something was coming, and it was close. John's pulse quickened. As he drew closer to the clearing where Max had stopped, the soldier was right beside him now, moving with a sense of urgency. The sound of the engines was louder now, unmistakable. They were getting closer, but so were they. They were close to finding the artifact. In the clearing ahead, the ground was marked with strange symbols, patterns that John didn't understand. Max stood in the center, his tail low and ears back, eyes fixed on the ground. "Is this it?" John asked, looking around. The symbols seemed familiar in a way he couldn't explain, as though they were drawing him in. The soldier nodded, his face grim. "This is it. We found it. We just have to hope we're not too late. As the hum from the artifact grew louder, John knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning of a battle that would decide everything. The stakes were higher than he had ever imagined, and there was no turning back now. Max stood silently, his eyes locked on the artifact as if he, too, understood the importance of this moment. The alliance between John, the soldier, and Max had just begun, but it was already clear that it would take all of them to survive what was coming next. The air was thick with tension, every breath feeling heavier than the last. Max's fur stood on end, his eyes wide, darting between the darkened woods and the pulsating artifact at the center of the clearing. The soldier, his face drawn and pale, gripped the device on his wrist like a lifeline. His body trembled, not from physical weakness, but from the palpable fear of what was about to come. John could feel the change in the atmosphere. The steady hum of the artifact had grown louder, deeper, almost like a heartbeat, a sound that reverberated in his chest. But it wasn't just the artifact. The woods around them had gone unnervingly still, as if holding their breath, waiting. Suddenly, a low rumble broke the silence. At first, it was distant, faint, almost like the sound of thunder on the horizon. But within seconds, the sound grew sharper, more distinct, a series of heavy metallic thuds, synchronized with an unnatural rhythm. It was the unmistakable sound of machinery, but it wasn't anything John had ever heard before. These were not the usual military vehicles, not anything familiar from his past. "They found us," the soldier whispered, his voice tight with fear. "They're here." Max growled softly, his body coiled and ready to spring. John's instincts told him to take cover, but there was nowhere to hide. The clearing was open, the ground too exposed. The light from the artifact flickered erratically, as if in response to the approaching forces, casting long, strange shadows that danced across the trees. John gripped his rifle, the familiar weight of the weapon grounding him in the chaos of the moment. He had faced danger before, but this was something else. The forces coming for them weren't just any soldiers. The soldier's words from earlier echoed in his mind. They want everything it can unlock. They won't stop until they get it. Before he could make sense of the situation, the first of the alien forces emerged from the tree line. At first they appeared as shadows, figures cloaked in a strange, shimmering mist, like ghosts that had materialized from another world. As they drew closer, their forms solidified, revealing a terrifying, towering presence. Their skin was pale, almost translucent, with a faint blue glow that seemed to pulse in time with the artifact's hum. They were humanoid, but their features were wrong, too angular, too sharp, with elongated limbs and faces that were almost completely featureless, save for their glowing eyes, which flickered like the light of distant stars. John could feel the hairs on the back of his neck rise, a cold shiver running down his spine. Max's growl deepened into a full-throated bark, but the soldier held out a hand, signaling for silence. "Don't provoke them," he said, his voice barely audible over the increasing hum of the artifact. "These are the others. They were sent to guard the key. They'll kill anyone who stands in their way." John tightened his grip on his rifle, his body instinctively tensing. The others, whatever they were, weren't here to negotiate. They had come for the artifact, and they wouldn't stop until it was in their possession. The first of the creatures stepped forward, its movements unnervingly smooth, gliding across the ground without any sign of physical effort. Its glowing eyes locked onto John, then the soldier, then finally Max. It stopped just a few feet away, and the air around them seemed to thicken, the very atmosphere charged with the presence of something far beyond human comprehension. "They know what we are," the soldier muttered, his voice trembling now. "We can't fight them directly. But we can't let them take it either." Before John could respond, the second figure stepped forward, its eyes narrowing in what might have been recognition. It raised a hand, and without warning, a beam of light shot out from its palm, striking the ground near Max. The ground cracked and splintered where the beam hit, and the air shimmered with heat. Max leaped back, barking furiously, but the soldier quickly grabbed John's arm. "We need to move now," he shouted. Without waiting for an answer, the soldier sprinted toward the artifact, Max right behind him, with John following close behind. The others remained still for a moment, watching them with their cold, alien eyes. Then, as if reacting to some unseen signal, they surged forward, moving with an unnatural speed that left John breathless. The ground beneath them shook again, more violently this time, as if something beneath the earth was awakening. Massive crack appeared in the earth, splitting the ground like a wound. And the sky above them darkened, casting a shadow over the entire clearing. The atmosphere had shifted again, this time in a way that felt even more unnatural. John's heart pounded as he watched the soldier and Max move closer to the artifact. The others were gaining on them, their glowing eyes fixed on their target. There was no time to waste. The soldier's voice cut through the chaos. Desperate now. We have to activate it, now. It's the only way to stop them. John reached the artifact just as the first of the alien forces closed in on them. He didn't question the soldier's words. Without hesitation, he reached down and touched the glowing surface of the artifact. The moment his fingers made contact, the world around him exploded in light. The hum of the artifact reached a deafening pitch, and the ground beneath them buckled. A force unlike anything John had ever felt before surged through him, as if the very fabric of reality was bending and twisting. Max howled, his body rigid with energy, and the soldier staggered back, clutching his chest. The alien forces faltered, their movements slowing as the light from the artifact consumed the clearing. And then, just as quickly as it had started, the light dimmed, leaving the clearing in an eerie, unnatural silence. The others were no longer moving. John stood there, his breath ragged, his mind reeling from the surge of energy. The artifacts. Power had done something that had caused the alien forces to pause, but not enough to stop them. They were still there, still a threat, but for the moment, something had shifted. They were no longer in control. Max stood at attention, his eyes still locked on the alien figures, but now there was something different in his gaze. He was no longer the passive observer. He had become part of this, and John knew that the dog had tapped into the same force, the same energy that had just been unleashed. This was only the beginning. And if they didn't act fast, they would lose everything. The artifact had shown them a glimpse of power, but it had also revealed the true stakes of this war. The air was thick with the remnants of the artifact's power, its pulse still echoing through the trees like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant. John stood frozen, his hand still tingling from the touch of the artifact. He could feel the weight of its energy lingering in the air, but now there was a strange silence. The alien forces were still there, their glowing eyes locked onto the three of them, John, the soldier, and Max, but their movements had become slow, almost reluctant. Max, standing by John's side, let out a low growl, his eyes flicking from the alien forces to the artifact. The dog seemed to understand more than John did. The soldier, barely able to stand after the overwhelming surge of energy, staggered to his feet, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked at John, his face a mixture of awe and dread. "It's not just a weapon," the soldier finally spoke, his voice hoarse and strained. "It's a key to something far beyond this world." He paused, his breath shallow. "But it's more than that. It's connected to them." He motioned toward the alien figures, who remained motionless but watchful. "They're not just soldiers. They guardians, and they were sent here to keep the gate closed." John's mind reeled. He had heard enough in the past few days to last a lifetime. First, the soldier, now weak and desperate, had mentioned interdimensional forces. Then the artifact had unleashed energy so powerful it had altered the very atmosphere around them. And now, this guardians? A gate? What gate? John asked, his voice tight. His thoughts were spinning, trying to piece together the fragmented story the soldier had been telling him. And who are they really? Why are they so desperate to keep this thing closed? The soldier's eyes darkened as he stepped closer to John, his voice dropping to a whisper, as if the very mention of it could draw the wrong attention. "The gate leads to another reality, a parallel dimension, a place where life and death are fluid, where the power of the artifact is magnified 1,000 times, where they, the others, come from." John felt a shiver run down his spine. The world around him seemed to warp as the soldier's words settled in, his brain trying to make sense of them. He had always known there were things beyond the ordinary, but this was something far beyond his understanding. "There's a reason they're so desperate to stop us," the soldier continued, his voice gaining strength despite his fatigue. "Because if the gate opens fully, if we unlock its true potential, ... He shook his head, as if he couldn't bring himself to finish the thought. "It would give them power beyond anything you or I could imagine. The power to change everything, to rewrite reality itself." John swallowed hard, the weight of the soldier's words pressing down on him like a physical force. His mind flashed back to the way the alien figures had moved toward them, their glowing eyes filled with cold, calculating malice. They weren't just protecting the artifact, they were protecting something far more dangerous, something that could destroy everything John knew. Max barked once, interrupting John's thoughts, his body tense as he looked back toward the distant tree-line. John turned to follow Max's gaze, his pulse quickening. In the distance, something was moving, quick, rhythmic steps that sent vibrations through the ground, as the hum of the artifact seemed to grow louder, reacting to the disturbance. The soldier turned pale, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he no longer had. "They're coming," the soldier muttered. "And if they get to that gate first, there's no turning back." John felt his heart race as the distant shadows began to take form. Figures emerged from the trees, their outlines barely visible. Against the fading light, there was something about their movements that made John's blood run cold in unnatural speed, a precision to their every step. They weren't human, but they were closing in fast. "They won't stop until they have it," the soldier said, his voice barely a whisper. "The others will tear through reality itself if it means keeping the gates sealed, and they'll use me to do it." John's head snapped back to the soldier, confusion clouding his thoughts. "What do you mean, use you?" The soldier looked at him, his eyes hollow and haunted. "I'm part of the program. They didn't just send me here to find the artifact, they sent me to open it. But I don't have the strength anymore, not alone." Max barked again, this time more urgently, as the shadows in the distance began to take form. The first of the alien forces had arrived, closer now, with a strength that was almost tangible. And with them came an unmistakable pressure of force that seemed to weigh on John's very soul. Without thinking, John grabbed the soldier's arm, pulling him toward the artifact. "We don't have time to figure all this out. If they get to it before we do, everything is lost." The soldier nodded, his eyes now focused with grim determination. He reached out, trembling, and touched the artifact once more. This time, the energy felt different. It wasn't just the hum of power, it was a call, a beckoning. As soon as his fingers made contact with the surface, a shockwave rippled through the clearing, the light from the artifact flaring brightly as the ground beneath them shook violently. The soldier's face twisted with pain, but his eyes burned with an intensity John had never seen before. "We're unlocking it now," he said, his voice strained. "But this is dangerous. It's not just about stopping them, it's about understanding what's at stake." As the energy from the artifact surged through them, John felt his vision blur. The world around him seemed to dissolve into flashes of light and shadow. And then, as the last of the alien forces closed in, he understood. The artifact was more than a key. It was a conduit, a bridge between worlds. And he and the soldier were just beginning to realize how small they were in the face of something so vast. And in that moment, John knew that there was no going back. The revelation had come too late. What they had unleashed was far more dangerous than either of them could have imagined. The others were just the beginning, and the true battle, one that would decide the fate of everything, was only starting. The blinding light from the artifact began to fade, but its echo lingered in the air, heavy and pulsating. John's vision swam as the world around him slowly came into focus again. He blinked rapidly, trying to clear the haze that clouded his mind, his body still reeling from the surge of energy that had coursed through him. His heart was pounding, his breath shallow, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever they had unleashed, it was far from over. Max, standing beside him, let out a low growl, his fur still bristling. The dog's eyes were fixed on the clearing, now eerily quiet after the chaos of the past moments. The alien forces had not yet retreated, but there was a strange pause, so the balance had shifted in some unspoken way. John's muscles were sore, his body stiff from the tension of the fight. The soldier beside him, who had been almost lifeless moments before, now stood taller, his posture straighter, as if the artifact had given him new strength. His face was ashen, but his eyes were focused, sharper than before. He turned to John with a look that held a mixture of regret and resolve. "We've just opened the door," the soldier said, his voice quieter than before, as though speaking too loudly might disturb the fragile calm that had settled over the clearing. "But the cost, we don't know what comes next. And we're not alone in this anymore." John nodded, still processing the weight of the situation. He knew what the soldier meant: the artifact. The gate tit wasn't just about them anymore. It was a signal, a call to arms. And the forces they had unleashed had only begun to stir. The soldier's eyes flicked to the distance, where the alien figures had gathered again, still standing in their eerie silence. They hadn't attacked, hadn't moved forward, but neither had they retreated. It was as if the opening of the gate had done something they hadn't expected: a shift, a disturbance in their mission. "They're watching us," the soldier said. "They've always been watching. But now, we've crossed a line we can't uncross." John felt the weight of the soldier's words, but he also understood them. He knew that the artifact had changed something, not just about the situation at hand, but about the very fabric of the world they knew. The others had been guarding this power for a reason, and now that it was open, there was no going back. Max growled again, his body tense as he barked toward the trees, his eyes locked on something John couldn't see. He could sense it. The danger, impending threat. "Do you hear that?" John asked, his voice tight as he looked toward the horizon. The sound was faint at first and almost imperceptible hum. Far away, like the whine of a distant engine or the rumble of thunder in the distance. But as the moments passed, the sound grew louder, unmistakable, now a low, vibrating thrum that seemed to resonate in the very earth beneath their feet. "They're coming," the soldier muttered. They were never just here to protect the artifact. They were here to make sure no one understood what it truly was. And now, they know that we have. We've awakened something they can't control. John's chest tightened, but his resolve hardened. The soldier was right. They had made a choice, and now they had to live with it. There was no turning back. The distant hum grew into something more. The ground trembled as if the earth itself were reacting to the impending danger. Max, who had been calm just moments ago, was now on high alert, his hackles raised and his eyes scanning the horizon. It wasn't just the alien forces that were coming. It was something else, something bigger. "They're not alone," the soldier said, his voice heavy with realization. "There's more out there, worse than them, and they've been waiting." For this moment, John felt his pulse quicken.
Ow.
What had they unleashed? He had known from the start that the artifact was dangerous, but this was something he couldn't have anticipated. The artifact wasn't just a key to another dimension. It was a warning, and the forces they had unleashed were only a fraction of the true power that lay beyond. Max barked again, louder this time, as if trying to rouse John from his thoughts. The dog's eyes were wide, his body rigid with an unknown energy. John followed Max's gaze and saw it. Far off in the distance, a figure stood at the edge of the trees, silhouetted against the darkening sky. It wasn't one of the alien forces. It was something
different.
Tall and imposing, with a presence that seemed to ripple through the very air around it. Its form was cloaked in shadow, but its eyes, they burned with an unnatural light. John's heart skipped a beat. "What the hell is that?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "That," the soldier said, his voice cold, "is what we've been waiting for.
Ow.
The real enemy. And it's come to claim what we've just opened." John didn't need to ask who the figure was. Could feel it, the presence. It was a force unlike anything he had ever encountered. And it was coming for them. Max let out a final warning bark, and the soldier stepped forward. His eyes locked on the approaching figure. "Get ready. This isn't over. Not by a long shot." The ground shook again, this time more violently. The hum from the artifact had reached a crescendo, and the world around them seemed to pulse with energy. The figure in the distance took a step forward, its silhouette growing clearer, his eyes glowing brighter. John raised his rifle, his hand steady despite the chaos around him. He wasn't ready for this. Not by any means. But he knew one thing. For certain, they had to survive this. Everything they had fought for, everything they had learned, would be lost. And as the figure closed in, the final battle was about to begin.